Hi, my name is Tara McGivern and this is my screencast for CA3 of Sound Design and Implementation. For this project I've been working with the Infinity Blades Grasslands project, and over the past few weeks I've been implementing sound throughout this level. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is my arrangement of the audio files that I imported in. So I've created an audio folder, and within this there are 5 subfolders: environment, miscellaneous, music, player and user interface. Each folder has the corresponding sounds, so we've got our barrel break, our plants, our material for environment. Miscellaneous is a bit more random, so you've got the bell, which you'll hear at the start of the game, the end game noise, and kind of just other little random noises. Music is like background music. With player, that is split into further subfolders, so we've got our deck groan, our footsteps corresponding to our different materials, and our jump. And this is also split into the jump thud, so where we hit the ground, and then the jump groan, so from the player when they jump. Finally, there are some UI sound effects. Now, at the end of every sound, you'll notice it says either sourced or recorded. Now, this corresponds to whether I actually recorded the sound or I sourced it from freesound.org. So all references to anything sourced will be in the game audio design document, and also the links to any of my recorded will also be in the game audio design document. So at present there are 22 recorded sound effects and 17 source sound effects, so that keeps in line with the 50-50 balance. So the first thing I want to talk about is the player footsteps. So initially, actually a quick scan the level will show there are different kind of materials. So you've got like the regular concrete, and then you've got the destroyed rubbly concrete, as well as some wood. So initially I made a series of physical materials, so you got concrete, grass, rubble and wood, but in the end I've only made use of concrete and grass. What I found was that when I went to assign a concrete material to a specific texture, it was also the same texture used throughout the levels, so you were getting the same sound whether it was concrete or rubble. So to make up for this, I made use of trigger boxes for both the concrete, or for both the rubble and the wood. So whenever a player walks over these, it will play the sound effect of like footsteps, as though the player was walking in rubble or walking over broken wood. So you'll notice these throughout the level. I made use of them quite small. Now there's quite a few trigger boxes here, and it probably looks like I spent a long time, but what I learned was that you can select multiple trigger boxes at once and kind of be able to connect them to the one node at the same time. So a quick overview in the level blueprint will showcase this. Now I've arranged every trigger box or everything into a common, so it's easy to find. So this is whenever we enter our rubble trigger. So at throughout the level there are 36 instances of a trigger box corresponding to a rubble sound effect, and then we also have a fade out, so as the player leaves that trigger the sound effect kind of falls off. The same goes for wood, and then there are also more for barrels. Now with regards to the footsteps, we will take a look at the player animation blueprint. So I made use of tutorials available on Moodle. So I added notify to our third person running animation, and whenever their foot hits the ground, we get a notification. Then we get the location of our player, and corresponding to that location we will play either footsteps on concrete or footsteps on grass. So I made use of cues quite a lot, and they prevent repetition. So if we have a quick look at one, we have 4 different sound effects, and then we feed one of those randomly in, and then we make use of a modulator that alters the pitch and the volume, just as I mentioned earlier, to prevent really any kind of repetition, so everything almost sounds unique and different. We'll go back to our third person animation blueprint. And in the same, just like our footsteps, we use a select, and depending on our surface type, this also works for our jump TUD. So when you jump on grass, it sounds a little bit lighter than if you were to jump on concrete. So we have this reflected and implemented very similar to above. We will play the corresponding sound effect. Now there's also a jump groan, but we don't have a select or get surface type because it does not differ whether you jump on grass or concrete. The next thing I want to showcase is our UI. So I made some UI sounds, and I implemented a basic pause menu to show these off. So if we take a look at our designer, it's just a basic resume and quit. So quit just ends the game and resume will continue. What we're able to do in Unreal is if we select the button, whenever the player hovers over, we will play a sound effect, and whenever they click, it also plays a different sound effect. So this is quite simple. There's the blueprint for implementing resume and quit, but it's just a kind of showcase of the overall understanding of sound design and implementation within Unreal. So initially, well, the basic concept of the level is that you're on this island and your main aim is to get off it. Now there are also enemies that you have to kill. So the plan was to implement enemies that our player would be able to fight against, but what I learned was this is quite difficult and in no way as simple as it was to implement in Unreal Engine 3. But I still wanted to showcase the sounds I made for these, so I imported some models that I got from TurboSquid, which are also referenced in my game design document. So here is our G36 rifle, and whenever our player runs into that, it showcases our reload noise. Now, having this gun is nothing without our enemy. So we have an enemy up here and one a little bit further on the level. So once again, I make use of a trigger, and whenever our player runs into them, it will play one of our death groans, depending on what our death groan cue outputs. To kind of also showcase a bit more violence, when the player presses the H key, we play a melee hit noise. So it's as though our player is whacking something. And yes, just use H to implement this. And P is also used to mention the pause menu. Now, as this level is quite realistic, I made sure that to use as much ambient sound as possible. So you'll notice even with these hanging lanterns, you've got sound effects. So it's kind of like a metal joint being swung slightly in the wind. Down here we also have lapping water, as though the water was hitting the rock. You've got wind, I believe we've got wind here, that is constantly looping. Every couple of seconds you have a bird call, thanks to another cue. You've got the flags billowing in the wind, as well as I made use of blueprint classes. So I didn't want to just do every sound with a trigger. So you'll see these trees throughout the level, so they were always here. But I made a few adjustments. So I made some blueprint classes, and if we have a look at one here, so in the viewport we've got our tree. So I imported our tree mesh and then imported an audio file and kind of bound them together, and then I went back to our to the project, removed the original tree and placed this one in. So now when the player is very up close and in it, they can hear that sound effect. And rather than using a trigger, this kind of made more sense because our tree is always blowing in the wind, it's always going to be outputting sound. And especially on a tree where, for example, this one is also being implemented the same way, the player might not brush up against the leaves, so it might not make sense for a trigger. So we've covered that through there. So this kind of was to create a really immersive experience. So everything has sound and everything is a very realistic. Now, your main aim is to get off the island in this. So whenever you're leaving, you try to go to this door. And the first time you try to go to this door, it's going to play a locked door noise. So this kind of indicates that you need a key. So if you look down here to the right, you will see a key, and whenever the player runs up here, it plays a little jingle noise. But if we take a look in our level blueprint, whenever we enter the trigger box for our key, we set a boolean has key to true, and this plays an important role later on. So we also have a trigger box at that door that played the locked door noise, as I previously mentioned, and whenever we come into contact with it, we will play, or we'll check our has key boolean, and if it's false, we'll play the locked door noise, and if it's true, we will play and end game tune. Now I've added a delay node to this because I wanted to end the game afterwards, as you can see from this quit game, but when I set the node to quit game, it would quit immediately and you wouldn't hear the end game node. So I have a delay of 2 seconds that lets you hear the tone, then it checks one more time that we have the key, and then we quit the game. So that's a real basic overview of how that works. It adds a little bit of bit more immersion to our gameplay. Down here we have our pause menu code. So when you press P, I've signed P in the project settings to menu. It'll set our game to paused and add our pause menu widget, and also set our mouse cursor to visible, and the same with our melee hit. So in our project settings, I've set melee to H, and whenever that's pressed at that location, we will play that sound effect. So this project was quite fun to do. One issue that I have, and is still recurring, is on this bridge. And having spoke to Peter the other day, I learned that it is a recurring issue with some of the rest of the class, in that footsteps don't play when the player walks across. So a suggestion by Peter was to replace the bridge with another object and just retexture it. So that's what I did, and you'll notice it's actually off color in comparison to the rest level. However, it has not resolved the issue. So currently when you run over this, with the exception of trigger boxes, it's quite silent. So yeah, the level was quite fun to do. I really gained a better understanding of Unreal. It's quite a behemoth in terms of software. Ideally, I would have loved to have implemented a proper gameplay, but given the resources and time, it was not applicable. But this has just been a basic overview. Gameplay will be presented on class in Wednesday the 3rd. So I think that is it. Thank you for watching.